My fellow Americans, there is so much tragedy, conflict, strife in the world right now, so many things to be better educated about, so many issues that are not just affecting us right now, but are affecting generations down the line that we should talk about. But God damn it, inside the NBA may be in its final hour, and someone on this platform needs to talk about its brilliance. Truth be told, I feel somewhat unqualified to make this video because I am not a diehard of Inside the NBA like I am with First Things First. I am not watching it every opportunity I get. Most of my love and knowledge of the show comes from me watching YouTube clips of it as opposed to watching it live on TV. However, as a sports talk show enthusiast, I feel obligated, really, to talk about what makes this quartet of individuals so iconic, what makes the show so legendary, what makes it so special in comparison with all the other sports talk shows it's been up against for years. And I think it's only proper to start with the man who may end up serving as the collateral damage from NBA moving off of TNT, and that's Kenny the Jet Smith. Now, the Jet does proactively make the show better, but in my opinion, his mere presence on the show is funny and valuable in and of itself, because it's a punchline. I mean, you have this group of four, you got Ernie, but then the two guys that were in the NBA are considered two of the greatest players of all time, and then you got Kenny, this man who is constantly made fun of, lampooned for riding Hakeem's back to two NBA championships. A man that let Justin Timberlake fake left, go right, shoot a jumper in his face, and then talk trash in his ear. I mean, having him alongside Shaq and Charles Barkley is funny. He is the punching bag for everyone, not just Shaq and Chuck and occasionally Ernie, but for guests, for viewers, the tweets that come in absolutely decimate the Jet. And I think we should all just be thankful that someone with thick skin like Kenny is on the show, because the show overall would not be nearly as funny and enjoyable if we had some guy just constantly protesting being the butt of every joke. It is so nice that we have someone like Kenny who is willing to be put in that position, who is willing to be clowned on, because the show would not be the same without it. But let's not kid ourselves. Kenny is not some innocent bystander who takes all these verbal sucker punches without responding, because he does retaliate against the others, against the very producers of the show, just in a more savvy, more subtle way. No, Kenny the Jet Smith's legacy will not be defined as being the punching bag of the show, but being the most inimitable instigator in all of television. When you sit down and watch a compilation of Kenny instigating, you know you are watching a master of their craft, because he knows exactly when to be bold and obvious with the instigating, he knows exactly when to be unassuming, but every single time, he manages to send the others into a tizzy, send the show into chaos, and avoid the line of fire. That, to me, is what is so remarkable about Kenny Smith. He's a double agent. He, yes, occasionally steers the show in the right direction. He does guide the others to actually talk about the sport they're supposed to be covering. But just as much of the time, he's right there with Shaq and Chuck. He wants the show to break down into arguments and fits of laughter. He wants to see chaos on the show. And if Inside the NBA carries on without that energy, without someone playing both sides like Kenny, it won't be the same. Now, within every ensemble of a comedy act, you always need a straight man, and that brings us to the winner of the Black Masters, Ernie Johnson. Ernie is so many things to the show. He's the peacemaker. He's the guy keeping everyone in line, making sure analysis is actually being conducted on the show itself. And it's very easy to see a situation, to see an alternate universe, where the show doesn't work because this one guy who wasn't in the league, that wasn't in the NBA, oversteps the line and is constantly dismissed right off the bat by everyone else. But because Ernie is not over the top, because he's this reserved personality who's not delivering very forceful, striking takes, because he's rarely, if ever, saying anything nonsensical, he commands the respect of everyone on the show and everyone at home, without being a pushover. He knows when to stand his ground, he knows when to get into debates and defend his opinions, but he's never overstepping that line. He's never being too loud for the show's own good. And in my opinion, that's a rather selfless role that Ernie puts himself in. I'm sure he wants to have fun with the guys. He could easily be another cartoonish, brazen sports personality. I mean, we see them populate FS1 and ESPN. But no, he chooses to let the others shine. He chooses to let them deliver most of the antics, deliver most of the show's most noteworthy and memorable moments. And that's a pretty remarkable and selfless thing to do. I think it's worth saying also that Shaq and Chuck, to me, are the heavy hitters of the show. Their antics are the reason why I got into the show. They're the reason I think the show is so universally beloved. But if you had another person that was constantly indulging in the fun on the show, as opposed to contrasting the personalities of Shaq and Chuck, I don't think the show is nearly as good as it is. I think it's too over the top, too goofy for its own good, and I think Ernie Johnson is an essential part of this four-man rotation. And then we finally have Chuck and Shaq, and I suppose I could talk about them in separate segments, but every time I think of one of them on the show, I think of the other. I associate them as a single unit, the big and little brother of Inside the NBA, respectively. And I'm pretty sure it's a phenomenon that everyone else is experiencing with me. When you're thinking about Chuck, let's say commenting on those women in San Antonio, I'm pretty sure you're also thinking about Shaq bursting out into laughter at the other side of the table. When you think of any jab, any dig at Shaq on the show, I'm pretty sure you're also thinking about Shaq bringing up how many rings Chuck has. It's not that Shaq and Chuck necessarily need each other to be great TV personalities, and I think moments like Shaq's hypothesizing that the moon is only 11 hours away and Chuck's bracelet story are proof of that. These guys, their delivery and their stories are so damn legendary on their own that you don't necessarily need that other guy across the table to make indelible TV moments. Shaq is great individually as the guy to laugh at, the one who takes himself way too seriously, the know-it-all who wants to tell you about when you should get gas, whereas Chuck is great individually as the guy to laugh with, the quick-witted one who somehow has a funny reply to every single word said on the show. But together, there is true synergy. Shaq and Chuck have created something special, something also quite simple, because really, the lifeblood of Inside the NBA, the reason why it has survived and thrived for so many years, is because of the simple pleasure of watching friends argue with each other and laugh with each other day after day. And that's why when people think about Inside the NBA, there is only the post-Shaquille O'Neal era. There is no history before him, even though the show has a slew of great moments pre-Shaq's arrival. Their laughter, their banter, their middle school-esque arguments, and the way each of these components takes over the show is what transformed Inside the NBA to something rather run-of-the-mill with the occasional great moment to consistently joyous and feel-good television. And kudos to the people behind the scenes as well, the ones that came up with Shaq Did a Fool, the ones that make those reels every single time it's on, the ones that make photoshopped images of the guys, and the ones that search for and include tweets from the audience, because they are largely responsible for the show embracing comedy and feeling like an interactive experience with the audience while it's on air. And you know what we haven't talked about at all? You know what word I don't even think I've said in the video yet? Basketball. I don't want to entirely discredit that element of the show because I do think occasionally there is great analysis to be found on Inside the NBA. I think these guys have some great takes on basketball and what it means to be a player in the NBA. I think that the segment following Giannis's "There is no failure in sports" is one of the great segments in all of sports talk. But I think very few people are outraged over the possibility of not getting to hear these guys' analysis in this format again. The people are upset because we're not going to get to see the guys mess around anymore, hit each other with fake props. No more Shaq crumbling up a piece of paper because he's hiding the fact that he's really laughing at Anthony Davis in a wheelchair. No more making fun of Chuck's fixation with food. These four horsemen have brought lighthearted, good-natured tomfoolery for years that is frequently more entertaining than the product the NBA provides itself, and that is something worth being upset over. But if it's the end of the road for Inside the NBA, then everyone behind and in front of the camera should be extremely proud of the product they've created and the memories they've supplied for everyone watching.